for anybody in a business and understanding, you lost a big customer, you gained a big customer. There's some great sales win or some, new product line or equipment investment or something like that. You know the story, the narrative, what happened inside your business. If you see the numbers, you're probably not too surprised. Well, the business went up or the business went down. Whatever the numbers end up saying, I think in a lot of cases, the numbers are kind of trailing behind the story a little bit. And I think the other way around, the story, when you're forward looking, when you're projecting or budgeting or whatever you want to call it, the story is running ahead of the numbers. But either way, there's always a relationship there.
Welcome to another episode of Empowered Owners. I'm Chris Fredericks. I'm the CEO of Empowered Ventures. Joining me today is Casey Grisez, one of my colleagues here at Empowered Ventures. We're excited to dig into some fun ESOP related topics today together. So recently we had an EV ESOP update meeting with all of our EVers from all of our companies that joined remotely, and we shared some information about how EV's ESOP is doing and some different kinds of information about the ESOP and how things work. So we thought it'd be fun to follow that up with a more in-depth conversation about some components of what we talked about. One of the things we talked about was the newest share price. So each year, the EV ESOP is revalued and a new share price is issued. So we're going to dig in a little bit here shortly to how that process actually works and what typically goes into the determination of a share price. But first, to kick it off, I want to kind of formally welcome you, Casey. You've been with EV for about a year now, ish. But you and I know each other longer than that, and you've been helping with a lot of stuff here at EV over the last year. But thought it might be a good opportunity first for you to introduce yourself to all the EVers who might not know you yet. So who are you, Casey?
How much time do you have? No, so I joined EV about a year ago. I'm the finance and marketing associate. I think that's the order of the title. We have finance and marketing associate. So wearing two hats for the organization. But Chris and I go back, I think 2016, 2017 maybe. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about it, but it's fitting for this conversation that I spent about 5.5 or 6 years doing business valuation. So worked on the TVF valuation before it was EV. And just through, staying in touch with Chris through the EV formation and all of kind of the steps along the way. There was a point, about 2 years ago, we started talking, and there was a need for both some finance help and some marketing help. And you were crazy enough to let me join, and it's been great ever since.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And I mean, just to reiterate a couple of things, you actually worked on the TVF valuation many years ago. And that's how we first came to know each other. And then you kind of took some other career path, in between then. But we stayed in touch, and you have a unique brain. I think that's a compliment. Your title, describes it. You have an interest in both kind of finance stuff and numbers and all that. And then you also have this kind of marketing brain, but I would put it differently. I mean, I think you put it differently. How would you describe why you have these interests in these two different kind of typically not combined kind of skill sets in a job?
Yeah, no, I think I was just about to jump in and say, I think I view it as it's storytelling just in two different languages, right? So on the marketing side, it's telling stories about our people, the businesses, employee ownership, its impact, kind of all of that side of it. When you get into numbers, it's telling stories about a business just in a different way. And even in that, I know most people listening to or watching this have never seen a valuation report, but it's, anywhere 80 or 100, 120 pages. Obviously there are numbers in it, but a lot of it's words. It's talking through, what the numbers mean, what story the numbers are trying to tell. And that's, if you look at a company's financials, either historical or forward looking, there's a story there. It's customers changing in and out. It's sales efforts. It's new products. It's equipment investments. Whatever is driving those numbers, there's a story behind it. So it's, they're a little bit different, I think, in how the stories are expressed, but it's still, I think, at the end of the day, storytelling.
I think that's awesome. It really helps kind of paint a picture of why, how people can relate to the numbers and the financial performance of a business differently than just kind of, it's easy for the eyes to glaze over when you just see a huge list of numbers. But when you start to think of it as, what's the story these numbers are telling me? That can really kind of change the relationship to the numbers themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for anybody in a business and understanding, you lost a big customer, you gained a big customer. There was some great sales win or some, new product line or equipment investment or something like that. The story, the narrative, what happened inside your business. If you see the numbers, you're probably not too surprised. Well, the business went up or the business went down. Whatever the numbers end up saying, I think, again, in a lot of cases, especially with historical, the numbers are kind of trailing behind the story a little bit. And I think the other way around, the story, when you're forward looking, when you're projecting or budgeting or whatever you want to call it, future performance, the story is running ahead of the numbers. But either way, there's always a relationship there.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So to kick us off, then we mentioned the share price, and that comes from the EV as a whole or any ESOP company being valued. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that valuation process actually works?
Yeah. Well, if you have about 45 minutes or an hour, we should be able to at least get through a little bit of it. No, I mean, it is a complex process. There's no question. I think when I was doing valuation, I think the spreadsheet or the workbook we used in Excel was something like, 25 or 30 tabs, right? And they all talk to each other, and all the numbers kind of, talk to each other. And the fun part for me was it's as much art as science. There are a lot of assumptions baked in. There's a lot of educated guesses, but there are assumptions. We think this number is right. We think this assumption makes sense. So it's not all 1 + 1 = 2. That's a big part of it. But again, I mean, there's narrative to it as well. But from a very high level, when there's a valuation done, the valuator, there are 3 approaches. There's the income approach, there's a market approach, and there's an asset approach. In the income approach, at a very high level, they look at a company's historical, typically sales and some measures of profit. How well have they done compared to what they forecasted? Are sales going up or down? Is profit going up or down? And then kind of same thing, forward looking, they see, okay, are you expecting to grow? Are you expecting to sell less? Are you expecting profit to do better or do worse? And for a valuation shop, what's really important to that is the accuracy of the forecast. And in a lot of cases, when you're valuing, you're buying future profit, basically. So how accurate is that forward looking process? And if forecasting has been hard, if budgeting has been hard, if you haven't really been able to hit the numbers, there have been reasons why, in a lot of cases, they're going to give you a little bit less, kind of quote unquote credit for that expected profit. So they take all those numbers, exactly what happened and what you expect to happen, apply some, called a discount rate, but basically, you don't know for sure that the profit you expect to make next year is what you're actually going to make. So you lose a little bit of credit, I guess, every year. And you add
for time value of money too, right?
Right.
Time value of money.
Yep. So add those together, and that's effectively the value in the income approach. For the market approach, there are kind of 2 sub methods. I don't know if you want to call it that, but it's the transaction method, guideline transaction method, and then a public company method. In the transaction method, so there are databases where you can see, although it's maybe a private company buying another private company, they will report, we bought this business that does this kind of work. It's a manufacturer, it's a plumbing business. Whatever the business does, we bought it for this price, this amount of profit, they're this size. They'll share some information. So you can look at those databases and see, as a valuator, you can see this business that I'm trying to get a value for, a very similar company sold for this amount recently. And you can kind of compare. So you can kind of make an inference of, okay, if that's kind of like the market price, that's the market value for this business. So you look at enough of those, and sometimes it's 5 or 6 or 8 of them. Sometimes it's, 20 or 50 or 100, depending on, if there are a lot of, say, plumbing businesses out there. So your sample size can be pretty big. Look at those again, make some inferences, and you come up with a value of what makes sense to apply to the business that you're valuing. Public company method is kind of similar, but different in a lot of ways. So you'll look at, let's say it's whatever, you're a small shoe company. It's the best thing I could come up with when I was thinking about this. They'll look at Nike and Adidas and New Balance and pick, a number of, as many as you can, public companies that are publicly traded on stock exchanges, and what's their value. So what is their, how is the public market saying this, so saying what this company is worth? It's a little bit different, right? If you're a small little company, you don't have international supply chains, you're not distributing to 100 countries, you discount what those companies are worth, but still you're comparing it to publicly traded companies. And again, come up with a value and apply it to your company in a way that makes sense. The last one, asset approach, is basically looking at the value of the things you own. So think of, if you own trucks or equipment or buildings or land, anything that you own as a business, what is the market value of those things? And then see what they're worth. You don't see this very often, just because in an ideal world, you're using those assets, you're using those tools, the equipment, the machinery to make more profit than those things are worth.
Yeah.
So it's really,
I've heard it said that that's almost like a floor value. Like you could almost set a floor on the value using that approach. Yeah.
It's like a fire sale, right? If the the business shut down tomorrow, there was no more cash flow coming in, what could we sell this stuff for?
Yeah. Which, so just to be clear, is an extremely rare occurrence for any company, let alone ESOP companies, which almost never, go out of business per se.
Right. Yep. You will see it, and that applies to TV as well, with if there's an entity that just owns real estate or something like that, just owns buildings, just owns land, it's not income producing otherwise, it's not generating cash flow otherwise, then you'll see we'll take the fair market value, the appraised value of this, the land or the building or whatever it is, and that's that entity's value. But typically, if you're making something or you're generating cash flow otherwise, when you get to your point, that's a floor.
Yeah, interesting.
So they'll do, evaluator will do, more than one. You want to typically see 2 or 3 of these approaches. Just you want them to quote unquote talk to each other. You don't want one to be way higher or way lower than the other, because then it's there may be something's off in your analysis. So you blend all those together, come up with kind of an enterprise value that makes sense, that incorporates all of those. In a lot of cases, you'll see the income approach, just because it's real numbers for the real business, is the most heavily emphasized. So you take those, you add in any cash that the business holds, you subtract out if there's any debt, and then you have your equity value. You divide it by the number of shares that are owned or that are in the business, and that's your share price. So that's a whole lot of words. I kept it under 45 minutes, but that's kind of the high level, a little bit of detail for anyone interested, but pretty high level for what valuation looks like.
I think that's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I do think starting with the income approach, almost all the methods are really ultimately a way to try to approximate the value of the future cash flow. The business has value in what it's going to produce, its future income, and that's the income approach.
Yep.
And that's why I do think a lot of valuations end up emphasizing the income approach the most, especially for smaller companies, because there's not as many comparisons in the markets or public companies. And it ultimately is about what the business can produce from a cash flow perspective. So I think just reemphasizing your point that when any ESOP company its financial performance, recent, and its expected future, that's what's really the main driver ultimately of how the share price, is impacted. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And I think it also, just reiterating, that's a big part of why is being as accurate as you can, or as confident as you can be in your forecasts and in your budgets, makes a big difference too. If the more confidence there is in how accurate that expected future cash flow is, the better.
Yeah. And also, and another way to put that is meeting your budget. Once you set a budget, like really trying to hit that budget has a lot of importance for kind of what's going to happen to the share price in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So share price is when you look at an annual statement, when anybody in any ESOP, not just TV, when you see the value every year, share price is just a small piece of that. So all the work the valuation firm does is just a small piece of that. What also matters, and Chris, you talked quite a bit about this in the ESOP update, is benefit level. So if you want to talk through what benefit level is, what it means, and how it kind of works in hand with share price.
Yeah. So when we think about account value, as you just mentioned, what an ESOP statement and the account value is going to be, it's really two things. It's how many shares do you have, and how much are each of those shares worth. And the second part is valuation, and that first part is accumulating the shares. So, for EV and for all these ESOP companies, the shares typically get allocated annually. So an annual amount of shares is released to all the current participants. And those are generally spread out, usually over based on, income or relative income of each person, capped by an IRS limit to make sure it's a very fair distribution of shares ultimately. But each year, everyone who's eligible, who's a full-time eligible participant, receives some number of shares. And if you take those shares that each person receives each year and multiply it times the new share price for that year, you get a number. And that's really considered the benefit level for that year. It's very similar to, and all this, Casey, but it's very similar to a 401k benefit that others and other companies might see, where maybe a 3 to 5% benefit is provided in the form of a contribution to the 401k by the company. So a person earning $50,000 a year, they receive a 5% 401k allocation. That's $2,500, that goes into their 401k from the company. An ESOP is very similar. Those shares times the value kind of divided by the annual compensation is essentially the benefit level of an ESOP. And most ESOPs, and EV included, have a much more robust or strong benefit level compared to a 401k. And there's a lot of data and studies out there that show that. But I think to your point, it's actually super important. The benefit and the accumulation of shares is probably as or more important than just what happens to the share price every year. Because especially for anyone that wants to build that ESOP value over a long course of time, just getting more shares year after year and that benefit level being better than average, better than a 401k by a meaningful amount, usually, that's going to create that opportunity for, life impacting levels of account value. That, it's not hitting the lottery. None of us in an ESOP company just, hit the lottery per se, but there's so many stories of how just accumulating shares in an ESOP over the long course of time, helps people be a lot more financially secure eventually. So I think benefit level is definitely the other thing to really emphasize. And we did talk about that a lot in our ESOP update recently.
Yeah. So share price versus benefit level, if I'm planning on being with my company for a long time, which of the two should I spend more time with? I mean, it sounds like benefit level, but.
Yeah. And benefit level, mainly just the longevity, I think, is what someone should focus on. Because for EV, for other ESOPs, the benefit level itself, the number of shares can kind of go up and down each year because of some complicated mechanisms. We're not just kind of putting our finger in the air and saying, what should the benefit level be? It's kind of set by a formula. So, it will go up and down, and there's probably a normalized level that it will end up at. Just for reference, I think most ESOPs are probably in the 10 to 12% benefit level range. And, that's more than double a 401k benefit. So just that longevity of just believing in that stronger benefit level as a concept and then just accumulating those shares over time, I think that's way more important to focus on than, did the share price go up or down? I think the reason ESOP companies like to talk about share price is because it's really fun. When you do have that year where the share price goes up a lot, or you hit a goal, and we'll talk about that later. It's fun. It's exciting. It's easy to point at and say, yay, we did something. And we all ESOP companies want to do that. We want to grow share price. But we don't want to get too focused on it as like on an annual basis, how much, or did, some years it probably could go down because you mentioned public companies, their stock goes up and down every day, and you don't want to live and die by kind of those fluctuations ultimately.
Yeah. But I think that's where, for me, putting in the effort that we can to, and we obviously there's economic factors that impacts public companies as well. Right. There are a lot of factors in a business outside of any individual's control, but the things that we can control to help contribute towards share price. I mean, that's where if benefit levels are higher than a 401k and benefit levels are at a great level, and also share price is going up, it's a great place to be. Not obviously not guaranteed, things happen, but it's a great place to be.
Absolutely. I agree.
But you mentioned, so with benefit level, obviously it's shares that are being allocated out every year. You mentioned in the presentation that there is a risk in theory that all the shares for a given ESOP company can be allocated out. So if there are no retirements, nobody leaves the company for those shares to get allocated to other employees. How do we ensure that EV, we don't hit a point where, hey, sorry, we don't have any shares left, you have to wait for somebody else to leave or retire?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it is a common topic of discussion amongst ESOP companies. So generally speaking, when an ESOP is established, it's set, there's an initial set schedule of how long the shares will be allocated. It's typically 20 to 40 years or something like that. And if an ESOP company just kind of sticks with that plan and doesn't do anything differently, at the end of that period of time, there won't be any more shares left to allocate anymore. They'll just all be allocated. And that has happened to some ESOP companies, but we are fortunate, and a lot of ESOP companies now, like in the modern day, let's say, have learned from others and others' mistakes in the past and developed pretty simple techniques to kind of not run into that problem, to not ever get to the end of a period of time and not have any shares left to keep allocating for a benefit for future employees. So the simple way to explain it is that every time that we have former participants who have left and they're going to receive their payment for their shares, all the shares for that year are spread out, let's say, over another period of 20, 30 years, something like that. So it's a perpetual share kind of, I don't want to say recycle or reallocation because those mean particular things in an ESOP, but they're perpetually re-spread out so that we essentially will never run out of shares. EV, as an example, is roughly 50% allocated today, and that's a really great place to be. And in our estimates for the future, it's going to stay around 50% allocated, and we'll just always have a nice amount of opportunity for future, while everyone who's currently with EV also has, a good chunk of shares in their accounts to make it meaningful.
Okay. So just think about it, I guess, in my mind, visually. Let's say we're using 30-year periods.
Yep.
And there are, let's say, 10,000 shares.
Yep.
Big round numbers. So somebody who has 1,000 shares allocated, and let's say, she retires. Those 1,000 shares aren't put back into the original 30-year bucket. They're established effectively in it's 1,000 shares in a new 30-year
bucket. Yeah,
and
that's going to be spread out
the
next 30 years. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense. So you mentioned before briefly share price goals, and it's something that we, at least I know for EV, I don't know if you did a TVF, but at EV, we certainly have always had share price goals. Recently set one for 2030. And, these are intentionally, the acronym BHAG, just I still don't love it, but big, hairy, audacious goals.
It works.
It works. It's so big. They are specifically big, hairy, and audacious. And you talked a little bit in the presentation about how we get there, and it's not just, again, it's not just financial. Like I mentioned with share price, there are ways that we can influence that. There are ways we can influence our business.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to talk through what you're thinking about in terms of how we can influence how we as an organization can work together to hit that 2030 share price goal. Now, if you want to walk through these one by one.
Yeah, I'll cover all of them. Just to reiterate, the big goal, it's what I shared in our update last week, recently, was that it's not, success isn't just hitting that goal. Like we don't have to hit that big goal to be a successful company over the next 5 years. But it's fun. Let's go for it. We see if we can get there. If we set a huge goal and we fall a little short, we still succeeded a lot. So just to reiterate, we don't have to climb every single mountain we put in front of ourselves. But we can see if we can get there, and the journey will be worth it, is kind of how I think about these BHAG goals.
You just got back from a backpacking trip in Yellowstone.
I did.
It's always worth trying to climb.
I did. And to be honest, there was a particular mountain that we wanted to try to climb. We wanted to get to the summit, and we didn't know if we could. And we tried, and we couldn't do it. But this is actually really funny. The fact that we tried led us to find a giant group of mountain goats that we would not have seen if we hadn't tried to climb this particular mountain. So we were able to sit and watch these really cool mountain goats. Yeah. And that was our win. We were able to have a win, even though we did not get to the top of that mountain. So, hey, look at that. It was a perfect analogy.
Mountain goats can always be your silver lining.
Exactly. So what we've landed on, how can everyone help us, though, to try to achieve this goal? And it's really, we're calling it ownership in action. It's what is being an EV or be an employee owner in an EV company? What does that look like? And what can everyone do to lean in and really do their part? And I truly believe everybody can lean in and do their part, because these are all things that all of us can do in our jobs and in our roles. So growth is the first one. Growth can mean a lot of things. Definitely, we're referring to trying to grow the business revenue-wise. Each company hitting its growth goals is a big part of what we want to do and need to do to achieve the big goal. But revenue growth doesn't just come from just adding customers or selling more to customers. That is one way it ultimately plays out. But that plus individual kind of growth as a person actually plays a much bigger role in what I think of as organizational growth, because it's developing new skills as an individual that enables the business to also advance in a really simplistic way. As each person grows and improves, the collective grows and improves. And it really does work that if everybody kind of leans into a growth mindset, that will translate to organizational growth over time. So that's number one.
Not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious if you have any examples of, just kind of day-to-day things that people in the opcos have done to grow as people. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that have added new skills that I've seen, it's almost like following a curiosity. So I've seen many people in different roles where, hey, I'm really curious about that other part of the business. Can I learn about that? And so we had one person, for instance, at TVF who was started off in kind of an assistant purchasing kind of role. But she was really interested in the more technology systems kind of process improvement stuff, didn't have any particular background in that. But because she was really curious and very energetic about it, the business supported her to learn and grow in those areas. And now her name's Kelsey. Now she's in a completely different role. And that role is, much more technology oriented, systems oriented. Her day-to-day job is, helping the business improve and use systems to improve. And she absolutely loves it. And it's a higher, impact role for her than what she started doing. So that's just one example. It doesn't always have to be a change in a role, though. I just want to reemphasize that. Every person's role and job can be taken to the next level, and just from individual growth as well. So I think of it more as like just following your curiosity and not just getting stuck in, oh, this is all I do. I just kind of do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Very related to that is the second one, the second ownership and action point, which is innovation and improvement. Focusing more on the innovation part, because, the growth in revenue, back to the first point, is so important. And it's really innovation in how our companies provide products and services, and continuing to add more value to customers innovatively. Doesn't necessarily mean we all need to be, an Apple or a Tesla or whatever, like reinventing some entire new industry. That's not what innovation has to mean. I think it means looking at what each person, each company provides to, as a service, and how can we level that up? How can we really, do something better and differently that's going to create an impact for that customer and make their job easier? Ultimately, each company, their job is to make the customer's job easier, whether that's through better products, better services, or whatever. So every person kind of looking for those opportunities to innovate is so important. The third ownership and action item that I think is really important is service. Every one of our companies, and I'm so proud of this, has a deep history of pride of service. So it's actually really neat to see still in action for me today. Like Benor comes to mind with the pride of service, the pictures of the products and of Benor's work on LinkedIn. If people haven't seen it, it's like pieces. It's literally works of art.
Oh, it's art.
And it's truly works of art, and I can't emphasize that enough. But I do think that's actually a shared thing across all of our companies, something we actually look for when we think about adding another business to our portfolio. It's just people that really take so much pride in that service that they provide. And I want to share too, that I don't think that's just external. So customer service is like typically a department in a lot of companies, but I think service is something every function, every department provides. And the customer could be, another department in the same company. It could be, the actual customer ultimately. But thinking of that yourself as a service provider, that's your job. Who is your customer? It may be someone else in the same company. And just wanting to take pride in that service. I think that kind of mindset is so key to, ownership in action, that ultimately, again, everything's all about growth and improvement that's going to lead to the share price goal. But that's in a moment to moment basis. That mindset, I think, makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, it's incremental. What are you doing to make things a little bit easier for whether it's customers or those you work with? And that those little things add up. It's nothing revolutionary. It's evolutionary, but when you add them together.
Yeah, exactly. And the last one, which might be a little counterintuitive, but I think is important, is enjoyment. And what I mean by that is it's hard to keep your energy up to provide great service, to think about growth and improvement and all those things if you don't like kind of your experience at work. If it's a drudgery, if it's a struggle. Having said that, I know work is, it's always stressful. It's always hard. That's kind of part of what work can be sometimes. But I do think when things kind of come together in an ownership culture where people are pulling together and rowing in the same direction and care about the same things and care about each other, want each other to succeed, the struggle becomes more enjoyable. It's maybe I'm thinking back to my backpacking trip again, but like, it's not easy to hike a mountain. It's not easy to, do hard work. It is stressful. It's hard. It's a long day. It's 8 to 10 hours or whatever. That's why it makes it even more important to enjoy, in some sense, like the whole effort and the process and being at work and the people you get to spend time with and being the type of person that makes others' lives enjoyable. All those things come together to create energy. And, I think that the individuals having enough energy to continue to do all these things, growth, innovation, service, that's ultimately the secret sauce to me of a lot of ESOP companies that I've come across that have been really successful, and actually what's driven so much of the success and all of our companies, to date, is these types of things. So hopefully this kind of ownership and action mindset framework helps people simply kind of keep in mind like what they can actually do day to day to actually impact, our ability to achieve our goals in the future.
Yeah, no, and I think for me, what's really, I don't know, is dovetailing off of enjoyment. What's really fun about this is it at least in part is to help us hit a share price goal and to keep growing the share price and keep growing the businesses. But hypothetically, let's say we do hit it in 2030, it's still not the end.
It's not the end. Yeah.
If we're going to be in a business for 10 or 20 or 30 more years, if you dread every morning waking up, going to do what you're doing, it doesn't matter what the share price is at the end of the day or what it's going to look like when you retire. Yeah. It's going to be a tough way of going.
Yeah.
But just the day to day of we're growing, we're innovating and improving, we're taking care of each other, and we're having fun. Sunday scaries tend to take a back seat when that's how you're living.
Totally agree.
So we did get, just pivoting real quick, one question. So with when you did your presentation, we solicited questions. We did get one. I want to make sure we cover it today. So I'll read it directly so I don't miss anything. If I'm retired and fully vested employee from an EV portfolio company and I pass away, what happens to the balance of my payouts if not all payout has been made to me? So I think that's probably a question a lot of people think about.
It's a really good question, and I'm really glad it was asked. It's really important, and it's easy to not remember or think about. It's kind of like life insurance. It's hard. You don't tend to want to think about things like this. So I'm glad this person asked. So yeah, in this situation, if a person were to pass away after being retired but fully vested in their ESOP account, the amount would still be paid in full to whoever the designated beneficiary is. And there's an actual form that everybody has to complete as part of being in the ESOP. And it's completed initially, once they join. But however that designated beneficiary or beneficiaries, whoever they are on that form, they would receive the full vested balance. It doesn't get, wiped away or something. But that just is a reminder to everybody that like you have completed that form. And if you ever need to change that form, just, reach out to your HR department and let them know that is something you need to make changes to.
Yeah. You use this as your moment to think about, who did I put on there? Should that change?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
You don't want to hit that point and have it go somewhere you don't want it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. But great question. And take this too as an opportunity, like keep the questions coming. There's a QR code that floats around now that people can reach us directly very easily, or just come to our website and at empowered.ventures and send us a note if you have any other questions about how the ESOP works. But Casey, thank you. This has been a ton of fun. I'm sure not the first or not the last time you'll be on the podcast with me or with us all. So thank you for all your explanations and for joining me on this episode.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, Chris.